Hey everyone, thanks again for joining. My name is Simran and I'm with CANOPY. CANOPY is a co-working space that's based in San Francisco. I'll add our website into the chat box below so you can go to our website, take a look who we are, and book a tour if you're in the Bay Area. Today's conversation is the third of a four-part series on how to build your dream team to build your dream home. And we're going to open this up to Q&A at the end of the discussion. So you can go ahead and digitally raise your hand or type your question in the chat box. And Courtney and Melanie will get to your questions at the end of the discussion. So I'm now going to hand this over to our panel moderator, Melanie Ryan of Involved Within. So Melanie, all you.
Yeah, hi there. Thank you so much. I'm involved with. I'm down in Los Angeles. I think I'm the only person here that's in LA right now. I can certainly relate very much on a personal level to this discussion as I finished the process of designing and building my home with my architect partner in LA. We moved right in the smack middle of the pandemic in May. So, and this was our first home build together, and we went through the process ourselves of determining the team and our contractor and everything else. And, you know, even being in the industry and in the business, we were like, how does an average person, go about this? Where do they start? And, so what a wonderful, wonderful topic to explore. My work that I do, and I'll introduce everyone on our lovely panel. I do business development for architects, designers, real estate developers, creative an ecosystem of collaboration. So something like this is ideal for me with networking and bringing people together that perhaps haven't worked together before, but want to and can meet each other and have a nice conversation about their process and their approach. So I think that's fantastic. So I'll start with Julie, if you want to talk about, introduce yourself and your company and your role, and we'll just go from there.
Sure, thank you. My name is Julie Roots. I am the principal and founder of Julie Roots Interiors. We are a small boutique firm located just over the Golden Gate Bridge in Marin County, but we work on large-scale residential ground-up construction, remodels, furnishings. We're going on 10 years of business, and definitely love and always feel that it's the best process when you can collaborate as a designer on the beginning of the process with the architect, with the builders, with the design team, and get everybody, all on the same page from the get-go. I think that always makes for, the most successful projects in moving forward. So thanks for having me.
Great, thank you so much. Kathy?
Yeah, hi, I'm Kathy Scott. I'm one of the principals at Walker Warner Architects. I joined the firm, 26 years ago. The firm's been around 32 years, and we're now about 70 people. We are primarily working in the West. We do a lot of work in the Bay Area, of course, based in San Francisco, but we also do quite a bit of work in Hawaii, Montana, Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, Idaho, you name it, down in LA. Really enjoy working in the West and just kind of the indoor outdoor kind of lifestyle that is promoted out here and the great weather that we get to benefit from. I have personally been working on some projects in Hawaii, really enjoying seeing those come to life, and would love to know these folks as well, though, based here in the Bay Area. We haven't had an opportunity to work together yet.
Great, thank you so much. I think the next series we should do is dream destinations. Design in all of everyone's dream destinations. I mean, Hawaii and everything, and Montana, of course. Like, wow, just amazing. And I'm a longtime follower of your work and very much appreciate you sharing your approach. And Katharine, how about you?
Thank you very much, Melanie, and thank you to CANOPY for having all of us. My name is Katharine Moodie. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Cook Construction. We're a custom residential single family home general contractor in the Bay Area. So we serve San Francisco and then the greater Bay Area, Northeast and South. We're a little more location bound. Of course, we'd love to build some things in Hawaii or even in LA. We have reached our tendrils down a little bit to LA and would love to think about doing projects down there. And since we're a little bit more boots on the ground, it's been a long-term aspiration for us.
Yeah, great. Thank you. You have a project now coming up with Euler Wu Collaborative. Is that correct?
That's such a great idea, that project, and such a great topic. So we really, and we'll kind of get into this, and Greg has talked about this in prior panels, but we engaged in pre-construction mostly with Euler Wu on that project, and it was so thrilling. It's a different type of project. It's a bit of a mixed use. I think COVID kind of got a hold of the project's momentum. So I'll be really excited to see if they pick it up.
Yeah, wow, definitely keep me posted on that one. And their studio is located nearby where I am over here on the east side. So, well, thank you so much. I'd like to, so typically when we think about, dream homes, I know the interior designers, the architects, they sort of get all the spotlight and all the, everyone wants to hang out with their interior designer and their architect and this whole thing. But from my most recent experience, you cannot underestimate the value of a solid construction partner. So I'm going to kick off this panel with you again, Katharine, here. And so we're just going to dive right in, all right? So basically we want to talk about contracts, sort of the, everything from how they differ with all of your sectors and what really matters in a contract. So I'd like to start off with, what is most helpful to receive from a potential client reaching out to work with you besides a generic wish list?
Absolutely, yeah. So I would say contracts really become relevant several steps into the process. When you contact us, I'll just speak for co-construction. When you contact co-construction, it's many meetings and phone calls before you're going to even really be looking at a contract. So at the very beginning, we get all kinds of inquiries, all like, I just bought a house and I would love to renovate and I don't know what's possible, or my parents have had this piece of property forever and I'd love to put a cabin on it, or there's water damage now and we want to rip out the whole kitchen. So we get a lot of different types of inquiries, just kind of where people are starting. And I always tell people, we will look at anything. We will come out and look at anything and meet with anybody and talk about their project and see if it's a good fit for them and a good fit for us after that initial look. Once we kind of get beyond the initial site visit and the initial meeting, what's really the most helpful is sometimes the most challenging for clients to share, which is what their budget is. So we can coordinate what our efforts are going to be towards the price that the client wants to spend. And I think people think that the contractor is just going to use up every shred of their budget, and we can work collaboratively with the whole team to either prevent that or to meet the goal that the clients have, or to really satisfy what the project needs are based on what kind of ballpark they're the most comfortable with.
Oh, yeah, that's very true. I think, contractors, constructions, they get kind of a bad rap for that. Oh, you guys are just full budget and all of these things there.
You're just going to build my budget.
Yeah, for sure. So Thank you for that. Let's to Kathy now. I would say, do you need contracts with each design professional, or is there a master contract? If not, are there ways to consider to better manage the contract system?
Well, typically we have not contracted sub-consultants underneath us. I know some people love that, especially I would say clients who come with an owner's rep. The owner's rep often wants to kind of put everything into a tidy bundle. And so they would love for the architect to then contract with all of the engineers and all of the lighting designers and all those other folks. I would say our approach has typically been, if we're going to go and wrap those people underneath us, we will mark that up for the time it takes us to administer those contracts. So it's actually better for the client just to go and contract directly with each of those folks. That said, we recommend the entire team to our clients. We know who's going to be the right fit, whether it's, again, technical engineers and folks they don't really need to ever interface with, or whether it's the design side of things. We're typically the ones hired first. And so we recommend the rest of the team. Maybe it's even, a few options for interior designers and landscape architects, since those are some pretty important people in the process. And same for builders. Of course, we're always recommending multiple folks, but we will recommend those folks procure the proposals and then pass them along to the client and suggest that they go ahead and sign them, but rather than wrapping them underneath us.
Yeah, that's true. The architect does dictate, and recommending a lot of these other partners to come into the project. So, I mean, I guess what would make a great collaborative, approach for you on a project? Like, what makes you refer this person again? And okay, or maybe we want to try a little different flavor to inject in, and this is who we can bring on this project here. So instead of just perhaps, or if somebody that you typically like using is, well, they're booked up, they're busy, as construction is as you all know, very busy right now.
Yeah.
So how would you approach that scenario?
Yeah, I will say high-end residential, that world has been never busier as far as I've experienced it in my 30 so years working. I think the pandemic has made everyone appreciate their homes more than ever and really focus on both wanting to improve perhaps what they're living in now, and then of course maybe build a second or third home that could be another place that they could relocate for a time and work remotely, now that we're all doing that. But in terms of picking and recommending folks, I would say it usually helps for us to understand, of course, the project location. We do a lot of work, as I mentioned, kind of all over the place. So there will be people who certain consultants really need to be able to be close to site and get to site regularly. And so for a Hawaii project, we might suggest structural engineers that are located in Hawaii. And then also just getting to know the personality and values of the client. There may be a good fit aesthetically or personality wise with particular interior designers, for instance, that would help us narrow down the list. I will say, of all the consultants, we typically know the least about the interior designers' kind of fee structure and the way that they structure their contracts. So it's usually not recommending or picking based on cost so much as just the right aesthetic fit and kind of, personality fit.
Okay, yeah, I get that. Speaking of personality, Julie, I have a question for you. So everybody thinks they are a designer these days. They like to play designer and all of these things. So why do you think it's important to leave it to the professionals?
Well, how long is this panel today? No. That's a really good question. I think, especially with, a lot of the TV shows and the internet and Pinterest and all these different Instagram and visuals and things that people have, and they think I could take this room and I can dump this and put this into my living room. I think there's multiple reasons of why you would hire a professional, but what I always try to educate people on from the beginning is, I know my limits and capabilities with my own home, with my exterior, plantings and my yard and, all those beautiful things I like to see outside, but I'm not, going to recommend plants to myself and know what's going to grow best and, certain times of the year and what's going to bloom and all of that. I hire professionals. So I think, in our industry, with a designer, there's so many layers and so many things that go into a space that I find impossible to take something that you see and, literally try to input it into your own home. Things such as scale, the use, the history of a piece, all these different elements have to come together like a puzzle. It's a recipe. And a lot of what I do, oftentimes it's intuitive. I can go into a space and, start to just talk with the client and look at the architecture and feel the space out, and, you know, putting together the palette and the materials and, you know, the stone and all of those different elements. It's a layered process, and it takes time. And it's definitely one of those things that it's harder than it looks. And, you know, sometimes people think, you know, well, I remodeled my bathroom and now I can remodel, you know, anything. It really, you know, it ends up, I think, being a disservice in the long run. But I think a designer who is reputable, who is educated, who has, you know, strong bones, if you will, can help educate you through the process, that it actually would save you money in the long run to hire a professional than to try to do it yourself, specify the wrong rug size and the wrong material, that, you know, you have a dog and then suddenly, you know, this expensive rug that you specified is never going to work in that space and you're having to start from scratch. We always work with
Julie, I think your sound cut out.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Am I back? Did you hear anything I just said?
Missed the last 10 seconds. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I don't know what happened. Anyways, I think, you know, a well-designed plan from the beginning will end up saving you a lot of time and money in the long run, and a lot of headache and stress. So it's best to start with a professional and let you carry through that process. I think it becomes much more enjoyable for the homeowner that way than trying to implement it themselves.
I agree with you so much there. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
So speaking of perhaps what can go wrong, Katharine, I want to go back to you. Everyone has heard of disaster stories when renovating a home. Can you walk us through any preemptive solutions to avoid such disasters?
Absolutely. And I can say something that's very much in support of what Julie is saying, which is, so especially if you've hired a contractor to do this project for you, people only want the building to last as long as it absolutely has to. And we have a really clear schedule, very specific and defined milestones. And we need stuff like picked and ordered and set up exactly on time in order to keep this tight schedule. And a professional architect and or interior designer who is used to doing projects like that will just, like, almost like the management side of interior design is, when you hire a professional firm, is going to be completely different. Obviously, Julie will excel at picking things out and making sure that the aesthetic of the room goes together. But I think there's a piece to be said for the professional style and like the actual doing of the project that goes a really long way as well. That's what my answer would be in terms of thinking about these like horror stories that we've all heard from people, is pick your team really well. That's what we're talking about here in these panels, is interview, choose people who you get along with, whose values you agree with, who, when they talk about how they're going to do the project, it makes sense to you. It's the, you know, it's the that you are working together cohesively, even kind of from the beginning. And that will really help alleviate a lot of these big issues. With a general contractor, we believe very strongly in pre-construction. That enables clients to feel out the contractor as they go along. You don't have to hire the same contractor to build the project as you did for pre-construction, but it gets you a good look at what's going on. It defines scope and budget. It gets you a good look at the contracts. And if you do hire the same contractor, they're ready to rock from the beginning, and expectations are clear. Everybody knows what's about to happen. There's a lot of, as we've kind of all been saying, there's a lot of pre-work you can do and a lot of things you can line up from the beginning. And the earlier you start with pretty much every discipline, the better chance you have of everything going really well. The good news is that odds are you're going to have a really good project. You're going to find a great team and you're going to build your dream house, and it's going to be really exciting. So kind of like with anything, I mean, there's like horror stories about buying cars, right? That doesn't stop you from buying a car. You do your research. So I would say there's a lot that you can do to prevent things going terribly askew, and most likely, most overwhelmingly likely, you're going to get a great project.
Yeah, no, thank you for that perspective. That's great. I mean, I would even say, like, ask you to explain the importance of a well-documented set of working drawings and best practices, maybe to avoid change orders. What things can be done to help avoid busting budgets or things like that? What do you think for that?
Sure, yeah. So we love sets of drawings. And the more detailed they are, the better. The more accurate the information the client will get. So, and that's information on like every scale. That's project schedules, that's fixture and finishes, that's everything, including budgets, right? People always go right to budgets, but there's a lot of information that we produced as a result of the drawings. So the better they are, the better and more accurate the items that you will get, the less kind of like plus or minus, right? You'll be like, if it's less accurate of a set of drawings, you'll be like, this is kind of what we think, plus or minus X, Y, or Z. So fortunately, or unfortunately, permits take a long time to get. So you have a lot of time to really develop drawings and put everything in order so that when you do get to the time of building, you're set to go. There's really only two main ways that budgets go higher than people are expecting. And that's unforeseen circumstances with the house. That's primarily with renovations, and then clients that change their minds throughout the process. And that's normal. That happens. It's okay to change your mind. It's one thing to think about all the design decisions that you're going to make when you're just sitting in an office and you're, putting together your Pinterest board and you're at the wishing well. And then once your contractor is building it and you walk in and it's like the first day they've put up drywall, right? You walk in and you can really see the house. You can see where you're going to live. It's very emotional for people. This is sometimes their forever home and sometimes it's their right now home, but they're invested in it. And I think changing their minds in any way is going to change the cost. And it's not impossible. You'll work with your team once, you'll get in there and you'll kind of see how you're really going to live and work with your team to make the best changes to kind of go along with what you have in mind. But those are the two main ways that things happen to budgets.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so true. It is such an emotional moment right there when you start to see things like taking shape, and for sure, very, very powerful. So,
it's also like imbued with magic though, right? Like that's the moment that you're like, oh my God, this is the place.
It starts to feel real, and you can actually get a grip on it. Because sometimes, I mean, I know this myself, even pouring the foundation, you're like, oh, that's it. It looks kind of, it doesn't look right. It looks a little weird, but yeah, once it starts going vertical, that's a very exciting moment. So, and I just want to remind everyone in all the participants in the audience, if you have any questions, please enter them into the chat and we will be sure to ask the panelists at the end, even if you have one prepared before we started or even during right now. So Kathy, I want to switch to you. Speaking of this like emotional process, how do we speed up the emotion? What can the homeowner do to prepare to help speed up this process? Everyone kind of is like, all right, it's kind of a hurry up and wait game, and we want to get things moving. Once they decide they're ready for their dream home, they want that dream to be reality and they want it now. So I guess, is there anything that you can pour into, help them just, speed up the process into the contracts? What are their wants, needs, expectations versus all those things there?
Yeah, well, I'll say, often, even in the very early stages where we're just talking with folks, like Katharine mentioned earlier, before we've gotten to signing up contracts and committing to one another, we're just talking about what their vision is for the project. And I think the fact that they're starting to think about that and think about their program is super helpful. But as Katharine mentioned, the permitting process is a really long process. And so one way that we try to help the process along on behalf of our clients is really trying to develop the design quickly to a point where we can get it submitted for permit. I mean, particularly for projects in San Francisco or other jurisdictions that are very long. We're doing some projects down in Malibu with similarly long process schedules. And so if you can kind of jump through the hoops that are needed for that early, get it in for submittal, knowing that it's going to sit for a while, we have lots of time to develop the design and the drawings after that, while we're waiting for those permits. And our goal is always to have drawings for construction done in time for start of construction. But, again, often in these jurisdictions, it can take 6 months from the time we submit for permits till we pick up that permit. That gives us a long time to do a lot of development and drawings. I'll say one other thing, just getting back to the question about changes and trying to avoid changes, is a really big part of our process is mock-ups, and really working with, we usually bring a builder on board pretty early in the process. I would say just right after schematic design. And sorry, can someone mute, please?
Yeah.
Thanks. But yeah, so we'll get the initial design to a point where there's enough for a builder to look at and where we have a sense for who the right builders might be. And we bring them on board, usually through a negotiated contract where they're meeting with the clients and they're proposing what their fees and schedule and team, and it's really budget for, not for all the trades, but for just for what their cost is to run the project. And that's what we use to evaluate and compare builders. But we bring them on really early and go through that pre-construction phase with a builder where we can build mock-ups. And the advantage of that is really being able to see all the materials together at scale, all the details, and really sign off on it or tweak it as needed. So we're not waiting until we're under construction to make those choices, which that is really, as Katharine mentioned, changes are something that kills you. It's not just that it's a change that could be a material that costs more than the prior material you had, but it's the schedule delay that it drives. Everything in our world takes a long time, whether it's fabricating doors and windows or structural elements or cabinets. So there's lots of lead time associated with all these materials. So you just really want to have all those decisions made as early as possible to avoid those late game changes that just, dragging out a schedule is about the best way to increase your costs. That's what you're wanting to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a delicate balance between like managing those expectations of like, okay, this is the permitting process. This is depending on that jurisdiction, LA, San Francisco, Malibu. Oh my goodness, that they're notoriously long. So letting the client know like this is what to expect and to plan and prepare, but also maintaining that excitement and momentum of like, hey, it's all gonna work out and it's going to be worth it, and to go for it there. So yeah, I agree. So on that, Julie, I'd like to ask you to help speed up this process, for clients as well. What is most helpful to receive from a potential client reaching out to you? Besides the generic wish list, is it Pinterest boards? Is there something else that I'm not aware of even? But like, what would be most helpful to you, and conveying those lead times and all these other things that get in the way?
I think it depends on what type of a project it is, whether it's new construction versus just the interiors of a pre-existing home. I think those are two different things. But I would say providing as much information as possible up front. If you have an architect, if you have, a builder in mind, is this a home that you recently purchased, a home you're currently living in? Some of my previous clients will bring me in to look at a home they're thinking about purchasing. So it kind of depends, where are they in the phase of their search. But I think definitely, any type of visuals or mood boards or, any saved images that they've created, that's helpful. But really it's establishing, a plan with the client from the beginning and kind of educating them through the process. And I think a huge piece of that for us as a designer is, what is your timing? You know, sometimes people tap into us when, you know, oh, we've been building this home for 2 years and we're moving in, you know, in 2 months. Or, you know, we just bought this new construction home and we are moving in, and, you know, can we have everything before Thanksgiving? You know, and then you have to educate the client on, you know, things that are custom take more time versus non-custom items. You know, what's your threshold there? Is it, you know, are there certain things that you're willing to wait for? And I think that is coming into play more and more, especially after this past year. I mean, the delays that I'm starting to see on our end from a manufacturing standpoint, with furnishings, rugs, you name it. I'm every day, it's like things seem to be taking longer and longer and longer. And I think, you know, we kind of have to pivot and redirect there. But, and I think just, you know, getting everybody on the same page from the beginning, you know, this is your timeline. If this is your install date, then we try to back end everything from there. So if you know, okay, we are supposed to move into this home on this date, you know, and we know exactly what our scope of work is, we start with that and then back end. So then they know, okay, the contractor is installing all the decorative lighting in between this window, then that means we need to have these decisions by this time frame, because it's going to take approximately this long. And again, going back to why a professional, you know, will work to your advantage if you don't have somebody in your corner that is understanding. And this is our day-to-day that we're constantly dealing with. It's what we're all talking about. We all know, you know, which vendors have longer lead times versus others. That kind of information, I think, is priceless. And the more, you know, we're seeing this backlog from the pandemic, I think, you know, that's really going to come into play. And which of your vendors can do certain things for you based on these timelines. But it's really that mapped out plan from the beginning, whether it's, you know, the architect, the builder, the designer, the solid plan, so you can manage expectations throughout the process, will always make for a more seamless process throughout.
Oh my God, yes, so true. It's especially when you're doing your dream home, obviously people want to have a lot of custom, and it's surprising, you know, and how long these things take. And then, you know, people are really caught off guard and they're upset, and you're in the middle. And so it's like how to, you know, navigate those things, and just it's about education and you know, letting people know. And it's not just like Amazon Prime, things show up in 2 days and everything. And I think another thing is I was on another panel with the folks from Be Original Americas, and they were talking about, you know, you don't have to have your whole house, like every little thing perfect furnished the day you move in. It's kind of nice to like see how the light changes and, you know, live in it, live in the space, and sort of have it ongoing too, and select things and go from there. But yeah, thank you. I agree. So Katharine, I wanted to ask you, speaking of this is another kind of issue that can come up, but how can the client make sure that they are protected? How can the designer and contractor make sure they are protected as well throughout this whole process of, you know, a lot of moving parts, a lot of expectations, and a lot of, you know, high dollar items that are coming into the dream home?
I think kind of what I was saying earlier, we are such firm believers in this, but I think really setting out your expectations and what you're looking for in terms of team building, and then relying on your team members to like fulfill the expectations that you set out. I think really good team members will do things like it will explain to you how things are going to work in advance. They'll explain to you the potential risks and the potential benefits of every decision that you're going to make. They'll explain to you why it would be a good idea to finalize even just the plan view that you're working on, because lumber prices are going up every single day. And that's a way to protect you from a 200% increase in lumber prices from the day you contact them to a year and a half later when you actually hire them, or when you guys actually get to that stage of the project. I think really working with a team who shares your core values. So we're pretty clear about what our core values are. We share them with our clients. We put them on everything we do. Finding teammates who think about what your core values are, think about what you want to get out of the project, and then find teammates who are at least congruous, if not directly matching what those core values are going to be. And find teammates that will explain things to you. Find people who will work with you. Find people who will collaborate with you and help you actually understand what's going into the project, help you understand what everybody is after, help you understand how things are really going to work. And that seems like, to me, thus far in the way that we've done our projects, the best way to protect the clients from something that they weren't expecting to happen, is to lay as many expectations as you can.
Yeah, that's very true. And, you know, working with people that live and represent and reflect those core values back to you. And I would say, I guess, what do you look out for when, beyond just those things, working with a collaborator, what do you look out for in their contracts that they lay out or present to you?
That is such a good question. We could have a whole panel just on what specific clauses and contracts people should look for. I really would look for, like, so most contracts should have some similar items in there, right? You should have obvious things like payment terms, industry specific variables. So we have some, I'm sure that the interior design team has some, that the architecture team has some. Look for penalties that might come up, like if X, Y, or Z happens, this is going to be the ramification in terms of like dollars. Ask how often those are really enforced. If I'm, you know, if the payment terms are 30 days and I pay on day 31, are you really going to charge me interest? Where the, you know, what are the companies like? And then I would look for, I would look for termination clauses, right? So every contract should have a termination clause and what's involved in that. And it should be fair on both sides, right? It shouldn't necessarily be skewed towards one side or the other. If you're reading a contract and anything in there, anything on any of those pieces seems wildly unfair, then I would think deeply about that. Most contracts are the contracts are your armor, and they're also the other company's armor, right? So in a perfect world, you spend all this time and you figure out all these clauses in these contracts, and then you don't see the contract again. You don't bring it up. It is not necessarily relevant to the day-to-day running of the project. But the question is about how do you protect yourself right at the end of the day, and we're, you know, if something goes askew. So really understand what you're signing, really take a look at it, deeply understand it, and evaluate whether you think it's fair.
Very true. I've always said, yeah, get it in writing. You won't have to ask again, but get it in writing. So yes, of course. Thank you for that. Kathy, I don't know if you would like to add anything on that with what you guys have learned and or what you look out for in a contract or anything like that. Any kind of tips that you can offer, even just to someone hiring you or working with you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was going to say the AIA, which is the American Institute of Architects, has some standard contracts that they've developed. And I think those are essentially industry standard that we use those all the time. And what's great about those contracts is it really clearly delineates people's responsibilities. And that's actually not just the team, meaning the architect and the builder, but also the client. You know, what is the client responsible for? I think clarity is a helpful thing for all involved. And so really saying, you know, both setting out what the parameters of the project are in terms of the scope and the budget and the schedule, et cetera, but also who's doing what. One thing that we do, since we do collaborate so closely with interior designers, is there's a particular part of the AI contract for architects that talks about what is and is not part of our services. And I'll say that probably the thing that's most clearly needing to be delineated is usually between us and the interior designer, because you know, we can do anything from kind of everything but the furnishings and the carpets and the fabrics, let's say window coverings and decorative lighting, or we can really partner with an interior designer where we're picking finishes together and we're authoring it in our drawings, but you know, it's a collaborative process. To interior designers do a lot of the interior architecture even. We've done that with some folks. where they really kind of even own the drawings for the interior. So really just clarifying all that, I think helps save a lot of heartache. You know, you just don't want to have any gaps in what people are doing, and nor do you want to have a lot of crossover, because I think when there's crossover, there's opportunities for you know, conflicting information or just double work. You know, we just don't want to have everyone doing the same thing and paying all these professionals to do the same stuff. So but yeah, I think those AI contracts are super helpful, just, you know, to clarify exactly roles, but then again, also like Katharine said, all the terms in terms of payment and termination and everything. I mean, you know, we rarely have had this ever happen, but if a client decides to, you know, just put their project on pause or you know, end it, just like clarity around how do you bring it to an end, you know. I mean, there's just all these things are helpful so that we aren't scratching our heads at the time something, you know, changes.
Wow, no, that's so true. Is like how to even put a project on pause or end a project, and no one really talks about that. But I mean, it is like perhaps maybe a marriage, you know, and you want to get those like, you know, prenuptials and sort of things like, okay, here's what to expect, here's how, you know, it's going to go if we have to, you know, change those immediate goals there and everything. But that's such a good tip, and it's so true to have check out AIA for resources there. So great, lovely. Julie, did you have any other, I guess we can put some closing remarks on contracts or any kind of tips or, you know, things from your experience that you've had, and then we'll open it up to some questions next.
I mean, I think Katharine and Kathy said it well. It's like we each have our contracts are very different because we do very different things. But then we do collaborate and there is some crossover. And I think, again, just communication in the beginning and deciding who is going to do what. We typically create a scope document that outlines like who's primarily responsible and who's secondarily responsible. And it's something that, you know, is shared with the client, it's shared with the builder, and it's shared with the architect. And then we all know what we are responsible for. So there's no, as Kathy said, this double dipping and double billing. And, you know, that's always something we want to avoid. It never behooves anybody to duplicate efforts. We are all have a lot going on these projects, and that's not something that benefits the client. It doesn't benefit us either. So, you know, I think working as a team and having, you know, that clear organization and those clear processes, again, makes for a smoother process, you know, as you go through. You know, from a designer standpoint with the contract, you know, some of it comes down to warranty, you know, who's responsible if something goes wrong with that product. You know, my client is purchasing product through me, through Julie Roots Interiors, so it's under our umbrella. But looking at, okay, if I'm investing in this, you know, custom sofa that's specifically designed for this room, and, you know, there's a defect somewhere, then what happens? You know, it's those kinds of nuances that I would be paying attention to. And, you know, any reputable firm will, you know, obviously stand by and be able to work with the manufacturer and find a solution to a problem. But I think just making sure you're protected. And then from a design standpoint, you know, a big part of the contract comes down to fees and how are we doing our billing? What does that look like? And just being transparent about that up front. You know, nobody likes any surprises. So again, when you've worked with a professional who's been doing this for a long time, we have a lot of data, you know, that we're able to extrapolate from and present to you to show you, okay, this is, you know, for this type of project in this range and this scope, this is what we're looking at. And in our world, it gets tricky because, you know, as somebody takes a very long time to decide something, and if we're on a time billing basis, you know, things can kind of start to multiply that way. But again, just clear expectations and communication up front will definitely help.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I agree. It's wish that we could have this panel as sort of a part of our like school curriculum for people that are, you know, one day this is how you want to build or remodel or do a home, and sort of share all of these things. I feel like there's such mystery in selecting a team and, you know, figuring out the best collaborative approach and what to expect. And perhaps it's even like going into a wedding, you know, people think, well, I don't know, they have no idea of concept of price or time or anything. And it's just sort of like go, and it gets quite chaotic. But
I think it always comes down to trust too. You know, a client at some point, you know, the best relationships and the best projects are a trusting relationship among, you know, the architect, the builder, the designer. And when, you know, there's that lack of trust, or, you know, the micromanaging, and that's where, you know, things can really start to get tricky. So I also, you know, trust in who you hired them for a reason. You know, lean on them, you know, really, we're professionals for a reason, and we see things in a very different lens than the client does. So, you know, I think it's our job to listen to the client and what their needs are, but you know, on the other side of that coin is thinking about why you hired these professionals in the first place, and stepping aside and letting them do their job in your best interest obviously makes for a smoother process as well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Well, I'm going to take a couple quick questions from the audience, if you guys don't mind. Let me see. This is from Leslie. Okay. When working with an architect or designer, do contracts specify how many rounds of design might be included in services? Example, each design phase. Wondering when something is beyond agreed scope of work and needs to be looked at as additional services. How does a contract cover agreed scope and additional services? Who wants to take that one?
I'm happy to answer that. Yeah, additional services, of course, for anyone who doesn't know, is just anything that's beyond the base services. And for a firm like ours, we work time and materials. So in theory, there shouldn't be additional services. It just kind of all wrapped together. But we do track our fees as a percentage of construction costs. And so we do isolate when things are kind of out of the norm, which is what additional services typically is, whether it's different scope than we normally take on, or if it's something that is like a rework out of sequence, right? I think getting back to the question of, you know, when is it too many rounds of design, I guess, if a client's having a hard time making their mind up about something, I would say for us, you know, it's incumbent on us to do a good job communicating the design and interpreting what their goals are. So we assume until we've gotten a design settled, it is base services, right? It's part of our typical work process. And normally what we see is, I would say we usually are meeting with our clients, let's say every 2 to 4 weeks. And each time we present something to them, we present new material each time for them to take a look at and give us feedback. And we present stuff that are revisions to the prior scope that we've presented, you know, just continuing to advance the design iteratively. I don't think we go back and change stuff more than a couple times usually, because it's usually pretty well considered. And we've had such a good dialogue with our clients that it's just not like our design is coming out of nowhere and nobody knows, you know, why we're proposing what we are. So I would just say, usually we don't go into additional services unless, let's just say we finished our schematic design and we're well onto construction drawings and the client says, hey, I've just had a new thought about, I need this kind of a functional space that I didn't think of before. Well, we're going back and unraveling. So that's when it's additional services to kind of like redo work that really had been completed previously.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you. You know, it makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I think at that point, after they've been working with you a few sessions and things, nothing's going to be coming out of left field, out of like, wait, what? So it's all pretty understood. So let's see, I guess I want to close things out. And I guess what I also want to say is if people have any additional questions, please submit them to Courtney at PembrokePR.com. Follow everyone on Instagram, all of our panelists, and thank you so much for for sharing your insight and approach, and perhaps a collaboration could happen in some way, or referral to happen. That's the best kind. And again, I hope we can meet in person soon, and whether it's down here in LA or up in the Bay Area, or maybe in Hawaii, we need to do a site visit or something, a tour, home tour. I'm certainly open to that. Any of those kind of designer retreats, maybe that'll be the next thing. So, but I just want to thank all of you for your time and your openness and sharing and everything. And yes, please, if anyone has any other questions from the audience, please email Courtney at Pembroke PR. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Melanie.
Nice talking with you all.
Yeah, nice chatting with you.
We can come field verify anything in Hawaii. So, you know, Kathy, you just
Keep that in
let us
mind.
know. Bring the tapes and there.
All right. We're on.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.